Hi, everyone. Welcome back. This is Dr. Katie and Sarah Duncan. And
Hello.
we have a name for this now. Should we say
That's
what our
right.
name is?
Consciously
Consciously Curious.
curious with Katie and Sarah.
Why not? Because that's what we're talking about, is anything that is in the consciousness realm. And we're just
Mhm.
curious about it, and we just love to talk about it. And this is what we would be talking about anyway on a random Friday afternoon. And so we decided to just start recording these, and we've had some good feedback. So we're just going to keep doing it, just talking about the things that we are interested in. And today's episode, we can say that now. Today's
Yeah.
episode is about why are we here? And who are we here with? Are we doing this alone or do we have guidance? Are we able to connect with things that are in this other realm? And yeah, we want to talk about this and all of the funny little stories that we have, both personal experiences, working with clients, and things we've read or researched. So we're going to talk about that today. Why are we here? And who are we with? You want to
Yeah,
take it
just
away,
what's
Sarah?
the meaning of life? You know,
Oh, yeah.
what's the meaning of life, everyone? Why are we here? Why are we here in these beautiful, extremely advanced meat sacks to live on planet Earth? And I've asked this question a lot, and I love asking it to people who are in a deep trance when they're connected to higher consciousness, for instance, in a quantum healing session or a hypnotherapy session. And what I've heard, and I really enjoy this, is simply we are consciousness experiencing itself,
Mhm.
period. And
Mhm.
while that answers everything, it also leaves so many questions on the table.
Right, right.
And yeah, I mean, that's my initial thought is that I just love that answer where consciousness is experiencing itself and in as many facets as possible and every single possibility possible.
Right.
That's what we're doing. And that's why it really does open itself up to how many different lives there are, how many different tastes and flavors of life there is, all the way from the range of experiences from extremely, you could say, good, positive
Yeah.
experiences, all the way to the very, you could say, very negative, difficult experiences. But it's consciousness wanting to experience every single facet of it. And I like to what Paul Selig and the guides
Mhm.
say. So Paul Selig is a channel and he channels the guides. I know you like Paul too,
Yeah, I like
Katie.
Paul Selig a lot. Yeah.
He says that, or the guides explain that
My
everywhere
favorite
we
thing
are,
ever is
God
when the
is.
guides are coming through Paul and then they're like, Paul's trying to interrupt. Like if anyone knows Paul Selig and like you listen to him, the guys are always like, Paul's trying to interrupt. Just be quiet, Paul. We're trying to say something. That's one of my favorite things with Paul. But yeah, keep going. Keep going. He's a funny
Paul is
guy to listen to.
interrupting now. He has some questions. We're asking Paul to keep his questions to himself until we're done.
Yes. That's my favorite part about any Paul Selig work is like, God, Paul, stop interrupting. But yeah, okay, keep going. Because I know where you're going with this, and I like what you're about to say, but I want to hear it. I want to hear
But
how you
yeah,
say
I
it.
mean, Paul says through the guides say through Paul, I should say, everywhere you are, God is. And they'll even say it as a mantra, like everywhere we are, God is, God is, God is. And when we're thinking about God here, we're not thinking about a man on a throne watching over you, judging
Right.
you. We're talking about consciousness. We're talking about everything that is.
Source. Yeah.
Exactly. And it just reminds me that this game, this play that we call life, is a dance of consciousness experiencing itself, and that everything is consciousness.
Mhm. So, question for you then. Do you feel like, so I think that's a very neutral position of like, it's just consciousness and it's like very neutral.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself more attracted to this very neutral position, or do you ever sway in one way or another of like, I don't know, like, because about this Earth situation, like sometimes I sway cynically very
Mhm.
Gnostically leaning cynically about Earth that I'm like, I think there's some weird shit going on here. Like I get into that sometimes, into those weeds. Um, but I usually come back around to the neutral side of it. But I just want to throw that out there of like, what is this game on Earth? Because I think you could be really broad with this consciousness experiencing itself when we get into the weeds soon, talking about like, okay, are there more than one life then? Like, am I this version of me, but then I'm also like a dozen or more other versions of me, which we definitely agree on, you and I. But like, what about Earth in particular? Is it neutral or is there a flavor to Earth? What do you think? And then I'll try to chime in what I think because I change a lot about what I think it is.
Yeah, no, I love that you bring up this question because when I first heard that, everything is God, I really struggled with that idea because I'm like, what about when terrible, horrible things happen?
Mhm.
Like that's that's God too. And I guess there is an element of, and now maybe you can help me understand this further, but there's an element of it's hard to articulate this, Katie.
Mhm. That's why we're
When
doing it. Because this
I
is weird
know,
shit. And I think that's what when you would be hanging out with friends at night having a couple of drinks, I think this is a conversation that people really want to have.
mhm,
So it's hard to articulate. But yes, so when you really want or when you really have what?
yeah, when something terrible happens, you want to not say that this is God's plan, that this is just the way it is. And it almost seems heartless. And then you have to put this personality on consciousness to say consciousness is heartless, or consciousness then is like, or God is like, has terrible taste in his mouth if like he could do something like this and plan these things. And again, I'm going to bring up Paul Selig and the guides just because they have
Paul's
helped me understand this
interrupting.
a lot. Yeah, Sarah's interrupting
Yeah,
now because they
because they have a
say
pretty
that,
neutral way of
yeah,
describing it.
the biggest issue that humanity has is the denial of the divine.
Mhm. A
And so,
separation, a
yeah, that
separation. Mhm.
exactly, that we believe ourselves separate, that we believe it's all separate. And so for me, it actually really helps to keep a neutral standpoint,
Mhm.
that, and almost a stoic standpoint, that these are experiences. And from my research, from my own experiences with my clients under hypnotherapy too, I've seen that, sometimes we do have lifetimes that are just very
Mhm.
difficult, that are extremely difficult, but we also learn insane lessons through them. And by being the villain, even
Yeah,
in
we
a
choose to be
lifetime,
the villain sometimes.
you're
Mhm.
someone else's hero. I have like goosebumps right now because I'm like finally getting around to what I was trying to articulate, which is that I really really benefit from taking a more neutral stance on good and bad, and that there is
Mhm.
no positive and negative experience. It's all contrast. And Earth apparently
Right.
is the area to come and experience
Right.
contrast it.
It's supposed to feel really polarizing. Yeah.
Yeah. So that said, what are your thoughts on this, Katie? You
I
chime in now.
change all the time. I think I recognize the whole game is neutral. And I find that there is a benevolence, whenever you hear like God is love, God is love. I think there is a benevolence in the game that the benevolence is growth, experience, learning. I do think that's the overall light side of it, like the benevolent and growth inducing side of it. I do think that that is my normal edge,
Mhm.
my normal belief system. But I also recognize that I think based on my own QHHT sessions, which we've talked about in another episode, if you don't know it, it's quantum healing hypnosis technique. Sarah laughs because I always miss one of the H's. QHT. But in my own quantum healing hypnosis technique sessions as a client, I had a really weird one. Two weird ones. I think I called you and I'm like, dude, get this. where, you've heard of like the Gnostic fairy tales that like Gnosticism is kind of this spiritual understanding that there's a God above God, right? There's a God above the creator of earth, that there's versions of gods all around that create different things. And like we're kind of um, trapped, if you will, on this plane of reality. And part of Gnosticism is becoming more illuminated or enlightened when you realize like all of the players there and all of the different subtleties of characters that are less savory, like the archons, right? Meaning like there are energies that are not in service to others, but they're in service to self. And these are kind of like the villains of our existence here on Earth. And so Gnosticism is like more of an understanding of like we're in a game, and the game is not rooting for us, actually. It's rooting for us to wake up and realize it's a game, but it's like filled with booby traps and filled with all these things that aren't necessarily like good, healthy, helpful, and like that's part of why we choose Earth is like it's like a really challenging game. Like we're supposed to be learning a lot here. But when I was in my QHHT session, I was seeing this like contraption of like, basically what happens is you see another life. And so I saw another life on Earth and I was just a regular person doing my thing. And then you die, and then you go to like where you go when you die. And I'm thinking I'm gonna go to like heaven. I've done life between life sessions and they were great. I was walking in like Greco-Roman architecture, meeting my spirit guides, and we'll talk about that soon because I think that's an interesting difference of like both of these things are things that happened to me while I was in trance. And so I had one that was very like idyllic heaven. And then this quantum healing one was I died and then I went into like almost like a spaceship type thing. And my soul was like harvested and like put into like a machine type thing that was going to like recycle my soul and like put it right back into another person, and that like it had been corrupted somehow, like it had been taken out of like the natural souls that like just regularly come back to earth, and mine was taken and put into almost like a contrived experiment that was like part of this weird other system of like life forces from different planets that wanted to know what it was like to be human. And so they had like corrupted the process of reincarnation. And I'm like telling, and I'm experiencing it as a like as the client, I'm telling the practitioner, and as I'm even saying it to the practitioner, I'm like, this is really weird. This is really weird, but like I'm seeing like everybody has a color. There's like red, green, blue, and you have to go through this like machine, and then the machine is like sorting you, and then like it's gonna put you back on Earth, but like they're like farming energy from us. And like that's the first time that I've ever seen as in a trance state, something that felt not kosher, like not great, not like love and light, not
Mhm.
like it felt more I was like cynical when I left of like, what is this life anyway? But it was like similar vibes of like, it's still to learn, it's still to experience, but like
Right.
somehow the information of my life is being like uploaded somewhere. And it felt very mechanical and technological. So that was an interesting new way of looking at it. Because normally I think you and I would say, like, no, we're just consciousness. It's all cool, man. Like, but maybe
Mhm.
there is like a couple other versions of reality where like if anything's possible, then anything is possible. And it could be even like skewed a little bit, like with other characters. I don't know.
Right. I mean,
What do you think
in
about
that
that?
case, even the bad guys that have kind of taken over that soul recycling machine, if you
Yeah.
will, uh, they're experiencing consciousness
Yes, that's what it said. It
too.
said, well, you
That's
agreed to
consciousness
do
too.
this.
Right. So
When I
then
was
they're
like, why
playing
would I
their
ever
role.
agree to this? And they're like, no, no, you're like into this. Like you want to be able
Yeah.
to like give the data to them.
This is
So
going to
that
be
was
like some cool
interesting.
flavor. It's going to be some interesting experience. And I mean, honestly, if we incarnated in lives that we're just chilling, we're a rock, we're just
Yeah.
like relaxing yeah, that would get
I've had
boring.
clients like
If
that. They read
if we had a
rocks.
life where it was just all blessed and all love and light and nothing else, boring, boring,
Mhm.
boring. I think that we like to get a little crazy. Like, I
Yeah, we
think
like the drama.
consciousness gets bored with itself. Like, let's look at
Yes.
how it reflects in our creations when it comes to movies. As an
Yes.
example, we create all types of genres of movies, beautiful, heartfelt, loving, puppy, make you cry movies, all the way to like, this guy's chopping people up. This is
Yeah.
horrific. Or, the
Hmm.
horror movies. And I think that consciousness, that's a perfect reflection of consciousness. Like,
Yes.
we kind of like to get weird.
Yeah, we
We
love
get
it.
weird.
It's like if you're
This-
going to get stuck on a desert island and but could bring movies, you're not going to only bring comedies. You're not going to only bring romances. Like you're going to bring all of them because you want to experience all of them. And I do think that that is part of our consciousness and our soul's personality is like we tend to choose different kinds of dramas to
Mhm.
experience. We like that as a soul.
Yeah.
We really like that.
And am I excusing like horrific acts or something by being like, well, that's just consciousness experiencing itself, guys?
Right.
Like, no, I'm not saying that, but I do think that it helps me understand why there are so many different types of people in this earth. And then beyond that, why, for instance, we get insights into potentially, beings that are very much in service to self and maybe have
Right.
malevolent intent around others, because it just helps me like relax into having
Well,
some sense of
and when we've
why.
had clients before, like I know I've had a lot of clients that when we go back in, we regress into trauma or abuse. We usually will bring the soul of the abuser in and kind of understand the soul contract there. And it's a variety of things because I think that's what I'm learning the more I do this work is like when we have from the West of a karmic when we live in the West, we took an Eastern idea of karma and we kind of shifted it to be more puritanical, which is like if you do bad in a different life, you're going to have a bad life in the next one. That isn't really how the Eastern definition of karma ever was. And I think when we do these sessions with clients, the type of karma that we experience, it is a little bit more true to the original definition, meaning sometimes those abuse relationships are like a person that you were abused by in another life, you abused in another life. But it's not like it's like tit for tat. It's more just like, let us, you and me, go in on a group project and we want to understand victimization. And so in one life, I'm going to understand victimization from the act of being the abuser. And then in another life, I'm going to understand victimization from the half of being the victim. And it's like in totality, that will be a really good understanding of victimization. And it's like, it seems to be a little bit more like this than like tit for tat, or like things will rhyme, right? Like in the sense of like maybe you were like a police officer arresting people who did bad stuff in one life, but then in the next life you did all the bad stuff because you want to understand like the whole totality of it. I find that when people are in these trance states, they're talking more about karma from that perspective
Mhm.
than like punishment. I don't know. Do you want to add
Yeah.
anything to that?
Yeah, I've seen that too. And I think it's really helpful for people because some people come to me and they are like, I just don't know why I've had this life. I don't like my
Right.
life. I would have never chosen this life. And I think that the idea that I chose this and agreed to it is total baloney, meaning it's
Yeah.
absolutely not true. And I I find that once they can go in and get some different perspective into the why, a lot shifts in their life for them.
Yeah.
Because instead of feeling like, I mean, at that point, a victim in their own lives, they can actually see some of the design of it and what they've been learning from it
Yeah.
rather than just sitting with this happened to me, that happened to me.
I think we have a lot more wounded healers that are underdeveloped than we think. I think a lot of us, when we go through these sessions as a client, and you recognize, like, oh my God, I was wounded, but I was wounded to become a healer for people just like me 10, 20 years
Mhm.
down the road, right? I recognize, like, even when I had a former life memory of I was a drug addict, right? And I was addicted to like heroin and like needle drugs in another life. And like Katie now, like I never did needle drugs or whatever. But then like 10 or 15 years later, like I befriended a heroin addict and like I had so much more empathy for this person because of my past life regression that showed me as a heroin addict. And it's like, I don't think I would have understood the struggles nearly as much for this person if I hadn't remembered in a different life. I was very wounded and I went to drugs because I was abused as a child and it like showed me that whole life of why I was addicted to drugs. And then
Mhm.
like now it's me, Katie, like I've never done needle drugs, but it's like I probably would have just brushed this person to the side of like I don't want to get involved with that. But I had so much empathy and like kindness towards this person because I was remembering this other life. So I think like that is one of the benefits of doing this work is like if it's your life now and you were wounded, you can kind of see the little nugget of wisdom and the nugget of like I don't know, inspiration. And if it wasn't this life, sometimes you find it in another life and you realize, like, oh, this is why I'm so passionate about X, because this happened to me in another life. And now I'm like carrying it forward. So it's like you can't complete the work that you were supposed to do in only one lifetime. Sometimes we're like using the different lifetimes for multiple jobs that we haven't finished, if that makes sense. I went a lot of
Yeah.
places
No,
with that, by the way, didn't I, in
I
that
love that. I
story?
love what you brought up in terms of karma and even understanding karma on deeper levels and understanding that it's not just a eye for an eye type of thing, that a lot of times it's more complex than that. And something else I really loved that you brought up was the layers of understanding and
Yeah,
deepening of compassion that can come out when you have a more expanded awareness of experience. And so this is very specific to our field, but having that past life experience where you were an addict in a past
right.
life, it brought in a lot of compassion and understanding for you to hold that in this current incarnation where you are right now as Katie Larson.
Totally.
And that's what I find too, that compassion is really expanded with this type of view of life and circumstances. Like I used to see the news and I would see a headline and just a terrible headline about some criminal that had done something terrible. And I used to think, what a terrible person. Who could
Mhm.
ever do that? That is terrible. And while, again, I'm not excusing that act as something that's okay, I have a deeper compassion and understanding like, holy
Yeah.
mackerel, like this person must have had a terrible experience at some point in their lives. And they're going through a lot, having acting out like that. And there's a documentary series done on these like murderers and rapists, and I think it's called um, Prisoner in Cell Block Y or something to that effect.
Mhm.
And in it, a documentarian goes in and she's sitting in on therapy sessions with these people that
Yeah.
have just done, the worst crimes. They're on death row, right? And what they find is they're actually deeply sensitive people that have gotten really messed up along the way, taken on a lot of trauma and pain and things that were completely misunderstood. And they were acting out in these ways to, doing the best that they could. And it comes out that way. But I think that that's the compassion that a lot of us miss. And I think actually it's a lot of that compassion is missing in the world, generally speaking. Even let's say you get
Totally.
angry at somebody in traffic and they yell at you and you yell at them and you're like, what a terrible person. Like that type of energy exchange is what we see all
Yeah.
the time. Even like, let's say in the political arena, there's so much
Mhm.
aggression there and so much demonizing people, like characterizing them with really specific viewpoints.
We're
And
othering
there's
them. Yeah, we're like
othering
othering a
them.
lot of people
You're
right now,
other.
aren't
Yeah,
we?
exactly.
Hmm.
You are other. And
Hmm.
that's like the opposite of having compassion and seeking
Hmm.
understanding. And I hope, I know from my incarnation, that's the direction I'm headed in. If I'm a reflection of humanity, I do think that that's a general reflection that humanity is heading in the direction of compassion. But that's what understanding these levels of consciousness and understanding karmic patterns, understanding this dance of life has really done for me, is also helped me have deeper compassion for myself
Yeah.
and all of the things I've done because I've been focused on, other people and headlines. But I mean, let's talk about like my own shame my own
Yeah.
guilt, my own like sexual shame, my own stories of things that
Yeah.
happened to me when I was a child. Like all of this, I would, before I started doing this work, I was extremely judgmental of myself. I felt really bad about certain things that I had done. And I would fall asleep at night thinking about these things. And um, once I was
Because
able
I
to
know
have
you
a
as a
broader
person,
view,
you're like critically reflective in a way that's like you want to improve, but then sometimes you
yeah,
get almost too critical. But like you're
well,
being
it's
reflective in a
judgmental.
good way, but you're also being critical to yourself and others. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and
Back
it's
then,
at the
yeah.
end of the day, it's just judgment of self, which
Mhm.
is really the opposite of compassion, understanding, and love. Because I wasn't seeing the full picture of, oh, that's why this happened. That's why she did it this way. And so a lot of energy was released from the shame. A lot of shame was released when I could see myself in that more compassionate light and understand the layers and dynamics of my consciousness trying to experience, my consciousness trying to understand.
Yeah.
And that's why even when someone comes into a session, they can tell me anything, anything that they've done, anything that's happened to them. And I can sit there and hold compassionate, open love. And I know I wouldn't be able to do that if I didn't go through my own inner journey with that.
Right. Yeah, that's probably why this work is tiring for practitioners sometimes because we seem to have to take a lot of little like self breaks to like process and integrate the things that we're being confronted with in our clientele. Like, because I think sometimes like you're meant to see certain clients when you're working on certain things because I know I'll have like a pattern of something I'm working on and then like every client I see will have that same pattern and then I'll have to like see it from all different angles. And it goes back to like these bad guys in the headlines of like, Dr. Brian Weiss has a lot of great books on this, and he was describing that sometimes when we have a life's purpose in this life, but we play a villain or a bad character,
Mhm.
we go, why would you ever choose to play this villain? Like, why would you ever want to be these bad characters? But actually, it's because they are teaching, like, a dozen or more people lessons around them. Like, they're teaching the judge that convicted them a really important lesson. They're teaching a police officer. They're teaching, like, the victims. They're teaching the families of the victims, like, really important lessons. And it's like that character is vital to all of these
Mhm.
other people's development. And it's like in one way to look at it is like, wow, that's actually quite heroic that you would take
Mhm.
on the shitty role to teach through the negative emotions, these huge lessons that needed to be learned. Like, I mean, this is like a terrible, extreme example, but like if someone gets shot, awful. But like, then how about that family created like a 5K walk that like tries to raise money for gun victims and like this all of these families then become like friends and closer and then they create more communities and then they create safer schools and then they create all these things and it's like that was the ripple effect and it's like listen that original thing that person that was shot originally that caused all this that's terrible like you could say oh god it's so terrible but the ripple effect was quite positive and so when you look at that Dr. Brian Weiss would say when you look at that life and that soul contract that that person had they wanted that in their life because they had this bigger plan of how to create change and they needed something that was more of a catalyst and the
Mhm.
catalyst had to be negative or nothing would change enough and I
Yeah.
think that is part of this that's when we like say it's just more neutral than you think but it's gonna present positively and negatively but it's more neutral than maybe we could describe in the human brain.
Hmm. Exactly. I think by nature and definitely by conditioning, we see the world in good and evil, and we see heroes and villains, and we see victims, and it's a lot more complex than that.
Right. So let
And
me ask you
I love
this.
that.
Go ahead.
Sometimes the villain that came through is actually like it's a sacrifice of love, going through that difficult lifetime as the villain, because imagine the acts and the experiences and the loneliness and whatever that person may be having to go through to basically wake people up, get people moving along a different trajectory, because that's it, they're a catalyst.
And that's what's nice about knowing the archetypes, right? Is like I think you and I we talked last one of the episodes about tricksters, right? We're like,
Mm.
gosh, like there are certain politicians right now that are a trickster character, meaning like they are presenting as a villain, and they probably are a villain for in many ways. But a trickster villain is someone who gets change through being provocateur, right? And
Yeah.
it's like that is something that when you can't just have one flavor of villain. You have to have, we talked last time too about a threshold guardian. A lot of us think that we have a villain in our life, but really it's a threshold guardian, which is like a troll under the bridge that you have to answer all of these questions, like they're stupid riddles of like, what's a three-sided shape? But it's because you have to prove yourself to get over the bridge. And like, so who once was a villain is actually like kind of like giving you a lift up to the next level of yourself. And so I do think that sometimes one of the nice things about our work and about understanding yourself going through like a life's journey is you start to recognize characters as archetypes. And when we see them as archetypes, you forgive them a little bit more because you
Yeah.
recognize that that's what that archetype is supposed to do. That's
Mhm.
supposed to be provocative. That's supposed to make me angry. That's supposed to create righteous anger, righteousness that I then change and I transmute into something good, And so I do think that that's what maybe we're missing as a culture is when we only say good, bad, hero, villain, you're actually missing all the flavors of those in between.
And you can actually say thank you sometimes to these people that are provoking because they're empowering you. They are making you wake up to yourself. They're making you take back your power in certain
Yep.
ways, making you stand up for something that you believe in.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really easy to, just see bad, but think about all the good things, good catalyst again for change that they may be in the world.
It's
And
true
I know it may
because we
be
should
totally
feel angry.
difficult.
Anger is a really good, powerful energy that transmutes, right? If you
Mhm.
stay angry, it's a simmering ember that's just going to burn you inside until you just explode. But if you
Mhm.
use that ember to melt something away inside of
Mhm.
you, it's the alchemical process of like it's going to make you change into I'm going to use this thing that I was really upset about. I'm going to melt that upset stuff and I'm going to create a system that solves that problem. And I think that's
Mhm.
what a lot of us probably in the next, 4 to 5 years in the United States that feel really frustrated. And I mean, the whole world actually, there's a lot of we're being victimized right now, a lot of us. And I think that's really going to propel people to becoming more sovereign in themselves of recognizing what power they actually had
Mhm.
that they kind of just willingly gave away. And now they're like, oh no, I want it back. And so that's probably going to be quite a trend in the next few years of recognizing how much we actually have within ourselves.
Yeah. And going back to consciousness in general, there's embodied consciousness, like we're here embodied in something. I guess we're here. Maybe we're in other places too. But
My favorite.
then there's disembodied consciousness or,
Yeah, we should talk
consciousness
more
that
about
people
that.
are contacting that channelers are bringing through that we can all bring through our spirit guides, our different ascended masters and things of that nature. Well, what's your take on all of that, Katie? What's going on
It seems like okay, what I reckon that we're in something kind of like a radio dial. And back in the old days when we had radios and you could get like 102.3 and then 102.4, every once in a while would like come in and you would like be listening to like a pop song and then all of a sudden like a country song would like come through and you're like coming from and then you turn the dial and you're like, oh, it's just one channel over. I feel like the disembodied consciousness is just in a different frequency, and that there is like all of these other realms that we can kind of tap into by changing our frequency. And so it seems like there are characters. So, like when you mentioned ascended masters, it seems like there are characters like ascended masters or guardian angels or some people that like everybody has access to, like, Saint Michael or Saint Gabriel. Like these are very like popular ascended masters, like a saint or Jesus Christ, right? Like you can kind of like access them through a little portal of that frequency. And then there's some that are like maybe just over like just passed over, like your deceased grandparent or your deceased friend that are, a closer frequency to us because sometimes you feel their energy in the room and you can kind of like tip into it accidentally or really focus meditatively or in a trance state and get to them. I think for me at this moment is how kind of I, uh, define it, that like it is just a frequency difference and that we could get into them, but some are just way, way, way higher frequencies and that are harder to like stay in as a human. But if you meditate and if you're in a trance state, like you can get to those a little quicker. But I want to know what your definition is, and then I want to chat about like the ones that hang out with us the most, especially spirit guides, because I love my spirit guide. And that was a really cool journey to get to know mine and like to use my spirit guide a lot. But I want to know what your take is first on the
Yeah.
disembodied stuff.
So I'm very aligned with the metaphor that you just brought up about the radio. I think the extra level I would add is something that came to me recently. I was listening and another person had suggested this idea that having labels for different frequencies, it's almost like, let's say you're trying to tune into Christ consciousness. So you are thinking about Jesus Christ, okay? That's going to be at a certain frequency. And it's almost like that's the radio station. That's 98.5. Okay.
You're
So
listening to Christ FM.
yeah, exactly. So
Yeah,
then you're like jumping right into that radio station. You're jumping right into that
right.
frequency. And actually, just by focusing on that frequency, you yourself can come up to a higher
Bring it.
frequency.
Yeah,
Some greater understanding may come through you. You may feel your karma gets lighter and lighter because
totally.
you're at a higher, more compassionate, loving frequency. And you could use, Christ consciousness, you could use any other, positive type of frequency that you may want to
Right,
tune into, but it's not necessarily that you're tuning into Jesus the man when he was on earth, let's say at that time, but you're tuning into that consciousness, that
right.
frequency of consciousness. And I really like that as an example
Same.
because if we just said, okay, I'm looking for some guidance, highest consciousness, could you please give me some guidance now? You might
People don't
hear
like,
like crickets. It's kind of difficult for people
yeah,
to like tune in, but if they have some type of radio station that they can go to, so let's say you have a spirit guide that's come through to meet you, and your spirit guide, you know them, they're this, you could just call them the great grandmother or something like that. I have a spirit guide that I just think about her as my great grandmother,
she
and
the
she's
one
not
that I have one that touches my
biological.
hair a lot. Do you have one
Yeah,
like that?
she's
Yeah.
very loving.
I
She's
love
really
her.
big and
Mhm.
warm, and she's just there for me. So let's say I just wanted some nurturing love. I'm going to use that as my radio station to
Totally.
pull in
Dial it
that
up.
frequency. And I wouldn't say that she is any type of specific being. She's not something of one source. I actually think that she is a point in consciousness, almost
Yeah,
a frequency of consciousness that's coming through. And when I attune to her, I get attuned
yeah.
into that same
Which helps
frequency.
explain religion, right? In the sense that like who I pray to is right. Because it's like
Yeah,
when I'm tuning into my person, like when during my PhD, I was super tuned into Ganesh. Oh my gosh, like this
totally. I was going
Hindu.
to bring up the Indian gods next.
Yeah,
I
I
was
love
thinking the
Ganesh,
Hindu
man.
gods. I mean,
Yes,
Hindu. I'm like, if you're praying to
the Hindu
Lakshmi,
gods.
like,
Love them. Yeah. And when I had my daughter, I was really tuned into Tin Hao, who is the goddess of the sea in Hong Kong, because like I needed my water to break. So I was like, come on with this, you know. But it's like there, and then I feel more attracted to certain deities because of the amalgamation of their energy. Like Guan Yin is one for me, I'm very attracted to, but I'm not super attracted to Buddha. Love Guan Yin though, that goddess of love and compassion. And so I think there's certain energies that we attract ourselves to, which is another thing that Dr. Brian Weiss, and then who's the other guy that you and me love? Newton, maybe? Yeah, where like when people do the lives between lives, they tend to see characters that they believed in their life because they're attuned to that frequency, right? So they'll see Jesus or they'll see Buddha or they'll see like, a Hindu god because they believed that. So it doesn't necessarily mean it was true per se, but it was something that they were attuned to and that they would be familiar with. And so that was what was greeted when they had these near-death experiences or these life between lives sessions, is what they saw in the afterworld. Yeah.
Mhm.
How about, okay, let's talk about the close friends that we incarnate with as a spirit, because we're talking about energies and spirits and different things that we're attuned to about spirit guides, because we do that a lot, right? You and me have a ton of sessions of like, meet your spirit guides, meet your spirit team, learn your
Mhm.
spirit guides. I love those sessions. People have a ragtag team of spirits. They get like a raccoon, and then like they'll have like a lot of animal ones. I have some animal ones too, but they'll have like a raccoon, and then they'll have like a ascended master Buddha, like a monk, and then they'll have like
An
a
angel.
grandmother, like mine too. But like I want to know first your experience too, like as a practitioner of like if you have any cute stories about that, but then like who's your spirit guide? And I know I love mine and I use it a lot, my main person. But like, let's talk about this because people might be like, what? We have these? And
Yeah.
how confident are we in this? Because I'm very confident about spirit guides.
Mhm. There's an explanation of this as well that's in human design cosmology that really stuck with me, which is that when consciousness itself said, "What am I? What can I experience?" that created the Big Bang, and out came all of these crystals of consciousness. And they're in these like pods, they're in these like groups of crystals. And the crystals aren't physical crystals, they're actually like dark matter. They're energy that is there, but it's not something that we could necessarily quantify ourselves. And these consciousness crystals, some of them decided, some of them were going to be embodied regularly. And so they would go in and out of bodies all the time. And most of them, the majority, actually don't go into bodies. They stay just these points of consciousness.
Mhm.
And as I was listening to this and kind of putting together my understanding of these things, synthesizing it, I thought, I think that crystal group is like where our spirit guides are.
Yeah, I do
Like
too.
we are embodying souls. We're here in human form right now, and that means that we probably have done this a lot, a lot, a lot, a lot. We like to do it, but we
Let's
always
go
have
back.
access
Yeah.
to our pod because we're
Yeah.
there and we're here. And I like thinking about it like that. And all the time I've heard in my sessions when people are in deep trance say that their spirit guides are always with them through
Yeah.
every single life. They've been with them since the beginning. And it's not like they change all the time, even
Right.
though for me, I do have some dominance of where I'll have a spirit guide I'll work with for a whole year, and then another one presents itself. And it's kind of dependent on what I'm going through, what
Totally.
resonates the
They
most
have
with
like
me. And
specialties, it seems.
yeah, like sometimes I'm learning something from like a teacher. And there's like kind of like a Buddhist monk looking spirit guide. And sometimes I actually need some nurturing love, like from my great grandmother,
Right.
archetype spirit guide. And I don't think that necessarily the names that we hear that we use for them are like their names. I think it's actually a way
Think so
for us,
too.
again, to anchor into that frequency so we can call upon them, so we can focus
Yes.
on something.
Because
And as
sometimes they
humans,
tell you, I don't really have a name, but you can call me
yeah,
something. Yeah.
exactly, exactly. And I think that's kind of what's going on. What's your take on it?
I love this topic. Oh my God, I could talk forever about this. Okay, we talked a couple episodes ago about like, sometimes even we're skeptical of things, right? That we're like, I don't know, like I don't know about that. But then like when you get enough experience, like over and over and over and over again with your clients, you're like, there's something to this. And mine is spirit guides. I love spirit guides. People's spirit guides are the coolest characters that you will experience in a session because they tell you when they were really there for you and they're like blown people my clients are like blown away of like, oh my God, I remember that moment, like I was so devastated and I felt like there was like a presence around me and like that was, the spirit guide said it, that was me. So I have a funny one of when I met mine. So my main guy is called Gil, and I was high when I first met him. And it was like in my 20s, really young 20s. And I was smoking weed and I took way too much. And everybody else was like laughing and watching like a funny movie. And I was like going nuts. Like I think for me personally, marijuana is quite psychedelic in the sense of like something happens in my brain where like all the barriers go away and I can feel people's energy really strongly and I can like connect to what people's thoughts really well. Like that's one thing that I can do. But then this particular time, it was like showing me all my life, like just like a flash of all my life, like people I have thought about, and like my random best friend in third grade, like all this stuff was like coming back to me, and I was scared because I had never had that experience with drugs before. Like I, maybe had here and there like past life memories as a younger person, but I had never had this type of thing before. So I was kind of like, like scared, and then all of a sudden Gil came, and I had not really met Gil yet. And he looks kind of like a stereotypical angel-y type character. He doesn't have wings, but he's got like long toga, and he has like long blonde hair, but he's very masculine. He's always to my right. I cannot make him go anywhere else. He's always to my right, which they say like your guides are gendered if they'll be on the left if they're a female and a right if they're a male. He's always on my right. But then he starts showing me like, oh, I'm Gil, like you and me go way back. And he shows me like the history of him and all of the times that he's been in my life. And he's like, listen to me, you need to connect with me more. Like, I'm real. You have to like connect with me. And here's all my friends eating Cheetos, watching like Super Troopers and laughing. And I'm just like, what do you mean? Like, why am I meeting my spirit guide? But ever since that day, that was in my like early 20s, I feel guilt all the time. And like he's actually very funny. He has a really good personality. He's like kind of a character. He likes to fist bump me like every once in a while. Like if I do something well, we'll like fist bump each other. And I can really tell that he is there and that he is like my ride or die. Gil is my main spirit guide. But then you and I have done a lot of sessions where we find out the team, like who are these little like the ragtag team that like to tell like what you just said. Like I have a Buddhist monk and I have this. I have an Indian, like more of a Hindu. I wouldn't say like a guru. I have a like a Hindu guru that came to me when I was in my PhD, and he was very like he shared all of the reasons why I was meant to do the study that I was doing, and it also came to me in a dream. Like I wasn't high, I wasn't in trance, but it was a dream. I have a also grandmotherly type figure of when I was a mother. She would come a lot, and she would like comb my hair and be like, "You're gonna be fine, honey." And like I have a lot more. But what's so interesting and why I really believe in them is they show up. They really show up. Like when you ask for help, when you
Mhm.
say like, "Oh, please, I need somebody. Team, please send somebody." You can feel their energy. And I think that is when you do this work enough from a practitioner side and you see other people be able to summon theirs, but then also you trust it enough and you start to summon yours and it works. That
Mhm.
is when you're like, okay, these things are real. And they'll talk to you. They'll tell you things that like you ask, and they'll tell you what you ask, but they have to be asked. That's like really
Mhm.
weird, right? That I think that's the rule. What do you think about that? Because like I get annoyed when nobody's helping me, and then when I finally remember, oh yeah, I gotta ask, they'll be like, took you long enough, But I think that's the rule. My understanding is like they seem to like there's like a free will involved here.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're not asking, you may have a door up that's saying do not enter
Yeah.
and do not speak, and so you're not going to hear their signal. You're not going to get the clue. But I do think that sometimes I get nudged along the way, even if I'm not necessarily asking, but it's because I'm open and I'm
Yeah.
interested in what they have to say. For instance, I think sometimes intuitive nudges come through me, for instance, like just double check the stove, something
Yeah,
like that.
I had
And
one save me in a car yesterday. Yeah, I texted my
exactly.
husband right afterwards, like I was turning left,
Mhm.
and I'm really sensitive to like people who run red lights, and I didn't see one at all. And I just had this intuition, like, don't go. And then sure enough, somebody ran a red light. And if I were turning left, I would have been like T-boned and spun. And so it was like that. I felt very guided of don't move because I looked, my senses said nothing, but it was an
Mhm.
intuitive thing. So you're right. I
Mhm.
do think they probably want to like reach in all the time and like help and like shake us and be
Yeah.
like, don't do that. And so I think sometimes they might be able to influence us a little bit more than we think.
Yeah, but I do think we have an agreement on some level of consciousness that I want you to do that, even
I
if
think
you
so
haven't
too.
said. Yeah, but I do think that if it's a specific question that you have about your life, they're not going to chime in and tell you exactly what to do unless you ask and unless it's correct for them to do so. A lot of times they say that's for her to figure out, that's for her to discover, that's not for her to know right now.
That's
Those
a
types
good
of
question.
answers.
What are their roles? Because I'm like looking back at my certain guides now and I'm like, huh. that's cute. Like, what are their roles? Because it seems like I have one that comes in when I have something really hard that's like
Yeah.
encouraging and kind of challenging in a good way. And then I have one that comes in like when I need nurturing. I
Mhm.
Gil is more of like the, right hand man, like he's always there. But like what do yours do? Like what are their roles?
I do think that in the past, I've categorized them with different roles in a way that it's helped me make sense of working with them. So I kind of know who to call upon and like who to go to. Lately, I almost bring them in like a council and I just let whoever wants to talk at that point because a lot of times I'm just like, yo, what is going on right now?
Yeah.
Like, why am I
They're
having
like,
this
this
issue in
meeting
my
is
life?
called to order. Yo, Sarah, you got some fucked up shit. Like, we
Yeah,
gotta help you with
exactly.
this. Yeah.
Like, yo, we all here because you need some
Yeah.
help, girl.
We
Okay.
even brought the
So,
raccoon over here.
so when I call them in, I get full body goosebumps. And
Yeah.
I'm a goosebump person. I get goosebumps in the feeling of truth and the feeling of like a different frequency rubbing up against me. I get
Mhm.
goosebumps when I'm like elevating in frequency sometimes, or especially when I hear the frequency of truth. And so when I call in my guides into session, let's say, I get full body goosebumps and I just immediately feel that like loving support around
Yeah.
me, almost
No,
like a
yours are
cocoon
supportive. Hmm.
of love and support. And yeah, after that, they might shoot some sideways comments at me and like, almost like they're giving me a smack on the wrist. But in general, it's always deep, loving support. And, being incarnated and
It's
having to
true.
like
They're
go
never
through life, it's
judgmental.
hard. It's
Hmm.
hard. So I feel like our guides are really here to just support us however they can. Almost like I saw in a recent quantum healing session and a hypnotherapy session where my client had a main guide and she experienced it like she was a little girl and the guide was just walking through the park with her holding her hand. And I just feel like our guides are kind of there to like
Yeah,
just walk with us. They're kind of walking with
I
us through
think
this
so
life. They
too.
don't want to be in the meat suit like we're in the meat suit, but they're there with us the whole time,
Yeah.
always.
I I agree with you. I think too, there is something that they're supposed to like remind us here and there. Like I remember
Mhm.
one time I had a session for when I was the client and I was with Gil and he took me to this river and the river was in the shape of a Y. And he's like, look, like everything is like he's like, you're on Earth, which is the open ends of the Y, the opposite ends of the Y. And so Earth is polarities and that you're supposed to like understand boundaries on earth. But if you look at the origin of where those two rivers come from, it's only one source. And so it's like they're both the same, like they're the same, they're coming from the same thing. And he's like, do you remember? Do you remember now? Do you remember? And I was like in trance, but I was kind of like, no. And he's like, God, humans are so slow. Like, you used to teach this stuff in spirit form. Like, you understand this so well. You used to teach it, and like, it's taking you as a human, like, forever to remember this. And so I think, like, they kind of know us from a perspective that's much higher and wiser. And I think there's something that happens to us when we're born where we obviously forget. We go through the veil of forgetfulness, which many people describe when they go through these sessions with us. They'll say, I knew all of this stuff. And then when I was born, I chose to forget. And so I think when we forget, sometimes maybe the guides are meant to remind us, of like,
Mhm.
this stuff, and then guide us into directions to remember of like,
Yes.
oh, that's right.
Yeah. I've heard
I
it said
see.
that one of the main thrills, one of the main reasons we incarnate anyway, is so that we can remember that we're not just a body.
Yeah.
That's so that we can remember of, how expansive and godlike we really are.
I have a really wholesome, cute met from one of my client sessions when in her deep trance, she wrote down some questions for her spirit guide and her higher self. And one of them was, why did I choose to come back to Earth this time? And the answer was the cutest thing ever. It was, you really liked the taste of strawberries. How cute.
I love
What if
that.
it's
It can
that
be that
simple? What
simple.
if you're like, gotta go back
Yo,
strawberries,
strawberries.
dude?
I gotta go. No, for sure. I was out to eat with my family for the first time in a little while, and we were sitting down at the table and the food was just amazing. This was like last weekend. And I looked at my husband and he's open to all of these topics as well. And I told him, I was like, yo, I'm getting a like out of body experience right now where I'm just like, yo, the food on earth is
Yeah,
fantastic. Like,
totally. We love the
yeah,
senses. I think that's why we come.
emotions are hard.
Mhm.
Emotions are really hard. But have you had the pizza on earth?
Right?
Fucking delicious.
And there's so many kinds. I feel like there is like something about humans that we like that. Like we love it. I think there's the sense part of it. And I recognize too that like some of us like get addicted to sense-based pleasures. We
It's
can
true.
get really hedonistic about stuff because for a variety of reasons, actually, you learn in hypnosis why someone gets addicted. Usually it's like it's the first time they felt love, or it's the first time they felt safe, or it's the first time they felt alive, and they get
Yeah.
addicted to that, seeking of that stimuli. But I do
Mhm.
think like as a sensitive person, I'm hooked on some of the senses. I love orgasms. Like I came for that, like I'll take an orgasm all day, every day. Like maybe that's all I'm doing in the other life is just doing that. But it's like I mean human orgasms are amazing, right? So it's like we have this, we have strawberries, but we have music. I mean, how great is
Yes.
music,
Oh,
right? Like so
music.
it's like these little things that we kind of don't I think we take for granted in our day-to-day waking life. But then when you go into trance and you get these kind of funny answers of like, oh no, like you really, you love water, like you love to swim in the water. Water is so important for your soul. Your soul needs water. And you're like, that's it? That's it? Water? That's why I'm here. But like then it becomes the mundane of water becomes divine, and then you really appreciate it in like the simplest way before when you just like walk in the water and be like, this feels nice. You all of a sudden
Yeah,
now are transcended of like, I love water, all from like a session like this, you know,
totally.
or
And
strawberries, strawberries.
I love it. I love it. And that's kind of some of my takeaways from this work. Like I stand in my hot shower and I'm like, this is amazing. This feels
Mhm.
so good on my body. So it,
And
it really
that's a
helps, I
fun way
think,
of thinking about
appreciate.
this whole why are we here thing of like, yeah, is
Yeah.
it serious? Like, is there big lessons you're supposed to learn? Yeah, probably. But also there's all these like little in between like bonuses, like the whipped
Yeah.
cream, right? Like, yeah, you're supposed to eat the cake, but like, have you had the whipped cream? Like that, I
Yeah.
think that's like the gifts that we're supposed to also indulge in the human senses.
hmm And if I were to add something to that, it would be that it's not that serious.
Yeah,
That's
maybe
what
not.
I hear
Hey,
all the time is that no,
yeah,
actually, it's not that serious. And when I have clients go through sometimes a life experience, they realize how fast it actually is. And from my perspective, I mean, it just really shows you like when we're in it, it feels like life or death.
yeah.
But guess what? We don't die.
Yeah. You know what I did for one client, and I would love to do it for more clients. So if you're watching this and you want one of
Yeah.
these sessions, let me know. But you should try this one too, Sarah. I did a living life review, meaning like how when somebody says like when I die, like a near-death experiencer, they'll say like I saw a life review, like I saw my life like
Mm,
come before my eyes, and then like how I influenced people and how I did this and how I did that. I did that for a client once because she requested it. She's like, can you just kind of like walk me through my life? And like I just want to start at the beginning and like see all the different things that like were important and like how I made a difference in people's lives, et cetera, et cetera. It was awesome. I should start marketing that more. Like, because you really see, when we say, oh, I don't know what my life's purpose is, because that's usually everybody comes in, they're like, I don't know what my life's purpose is. And it was like, well, what was your purpose when you were 12? Well, I don't know.
mm,
Well, you had a different purpose then. Like your purpose might have been to sit with Susie at the playground because she didn't have a friend, and you taught Susie that what it feels like to have a friend. That was at 12. And then at 12 and a half, your purpose was to help your brother with this. And like, so
mm,
you learn like all of the ways that you were very integral in somebody else's existence just by being yourself. And I thought
mm,
like that was such a cool, empowering kind of session because then it just makes your normal everyday life purposeful and just by being
mm.
yourself. And Paul Selig
Yeah.
always used to say that it's just by being that we are meant to be alive, just by being. And like that seems
Mhm,
boring, but maybe that really is it.
mhm. Yeah. Why are we here? To be, to just be.
Lame. Can I have a
Ah,
strawberry out of
I
it?
feel like
Yeah.
I feel like we came full circle from very broad
See
of
what I did
we're here
there?
to just experience consciousness to we're here to just be. So I hope you all got some answers today.
Yes, that's
That's
good. This is a good end. Let's wrap it
this is really
up.
fun. Yeah,
Go
let's
eat a
wrap it up.
strawberry.
Yeah, take a hot
Nice sex.
shower.
Have good, nice orgasms. That's why we're
Ah,
here, people.
just enjoy. Just enjoy.
Yes, thank
And
you
it's
for
not that serious.
tuning in. If you have other suggestions of what you would like to learn and hear us chat about, let us
Mhm.
know and pop it in the comments, and we'll start recording more for you. Have a great day.